What is up, guys? So coming at you live from the B&L Volvo Studios outside of Richmond, Indiana. My truck broke down this afternoon, and so I got my cousin on the line, and we figured we would give this first episode a go round while I wait to have my truck fixed. So I wanted to first and foremost thank all of you for checking this out. So the jungle is basically it's based off life experience and how people have overcome adversity. Most of my guests are going to be people who have struggled with felonies, jail stints, addictions. It's going to primarily focus on jail because I think that's a very hot topic that not a whole lot of people discuss. And we're going to go from there. What was your childhood like? How did people get involved in jail? What was your first stint like? What was your experiences like? How did you overcome these experiences? And what you've learned throughout the years? How's it? I mean, for me personally, it's made me a much better person. So that's the stuff I want to talk about. I don't think it gets enough attention. I don't think the people that have climbed out of those holes get enough recognition and attention. They paid their debt to society, and yet they still kind of get kicked in the teeth. So what I want to do here is for the first episode, I kind of wanted to give you guys what my background and my story was. So I've invited my cousin Brian, who's been like a brother to me since we were little kids. We grew up together. I love this man. I respect this man. He is a awesome person. He's got a couple projects in the works as well. We're going to plug those at some point. But guys, ladies, girls, uncles, aunts, whoever's checking us out, this is my cousin Brian.
What's up, everybody? I'm Brian. Really glad to be here. Like Chris was saying, I'm really excited to get this going. We've just been in this season of just like self-realization and just trying to figure some things out. So sometimes just answering, the questions from the past can be a significant thing that can affect your future, man. When you start really digging deep and getting into like the psyche and the psychology of growing up and things of that sort. So I'm really looking forward to this podcast. I'm really looking forward to the amount of people that are going to be helped and listening to this thing and hopefully making their lives better, because life is all about growth, man. We got to look at life's lessons in the ups and downs as opportunities to get better, And so I'm really excited, man. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, man. I for those of you that don't know, I obviously drive a semi. I'm recording from the back of my truck, and I talked to my cousin. I talk to Brian once, twice, sometimes 3 times a week, and we've kind of been pushing each other to find our brand and our niche and figure out how we can help people, because I think both of us have been just at a point in our lives where we don't feel we've done enough for the community. We don't feel we have done enough just to help society as a whole. And, this is kind of us going back and forth, and, he kind of helped me brainstorm. I help him brainstorm, but we've, it's been great driving a semi and being able to connect with Brian a couple times a week. I think we're on to a good thing here. We'll see where it takes us, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, man, let's get started.
Yeah, so what we're going to do here, guys, is Brian, he's got some questions for me that kind of like jump back through history, detail the show a little bit, and then I'm going to let him take it away.
All right. Well, I think first thing, man, is setting the foundation. You gotta lay the groundwork here. So why don't you tell me a little bit about like what life was like growing up? Just tell me a little bit about your childhood, like the early years growing up. Just kind of get the ball rolling.
So obviously but so I grew up a country boy. We grew up in the middle of it was called Industry Road. It was out just cornfields and train tracks, and that was about it. Small town. My graduating class was about 140 people. I was an athlete through high school. I was a stoner through high school. I was an idiot through high school, but I had a lot of friends. Like I was always I would always make friends with everybody. But my home life, it was kind of a double-edged sword. I'll talk about my dad real quick. So my dad he was a workaholic. He was a great dad. In the aspect of a provider. My dad was, I think a lot of where I got my bucking against authority and so on and so forth was my father. He was he was very much so a snakeskin cowboy boot. outlaw country, button down, Western shirt,
Yeah.
fuck you money kind of guy. He railed against anybody that had a difference of opinion, but you know, he was also always very loving, respectful, and kind. You just didn't want to scuff his snake skins. Like you scuff those boots and Donnie Tackett's coming for you. And you know, I very much so remember like just watching him growing up and when there were instances with police or judges or because he owned some bars downtown. He worked for ODOT for a long time, owned some bars downtown. And I remember once the bars opened up, there was a lot of back and forth with the city. He had a lot of run-ins with police from his patrons and judges. There was issues with zoning in the bar. And my dad was always the type of guy that he had fuck you money and he wasn't afraid to throw it around just to prove a point. And you know, I think that's where I got a lot of my hard-willed bucking against authority traits from. And then you have my mom on the other side, who she was a housewife. She stayed home with us kids. She was loving. She was smart. She was great at providing like advice, so on and so forth. And she taught me respect. She taught me morals. She taught me it was my dad that I feared. It was my mom that showed me like the loving, nurturing aspect that a mother should. The problem is you put both of those together and you end up with me, who has authority issues but is still respectful. I'm a clusterfuck of everything across the board. So, but yeah, man, growing up was okay. We had a good life. You know, we had the house that all the family came to. We had the pools, the trampolines, we had all the toys, and I didn't have a bad childhood. Like I mean, my dad worked a lot, didn't really have a relationship with my dad. By the time I was 16 years old and could drive, if I wanted to spend time with my old man, I went up and I sat on a bar stool next to him at his bar. And I was okay with that. Like that's what he enjoyed doing, and that was kind of like the lifestyle I was starting to get drawn into. So I was like, hey, this is cool. My mom, she was very much so like I remember those years when I was like 16 and up. I remember she threw a fit one time. She wanted everybody home at a certain time to have dinner at the table because she was always big on dinner at the table. And, you know, my dad and I were always like, I'm out running the streets. He's up at the bar. And I remember her just being like blatantly upset. Like, you know, this was her family. And obviously, you know, kids get older and they kind of shy away from the nest. And but I remember she's the one that instilled all the values in me. She's the one that instilled like the love and the respect and the just the overall, you know, love thy neighbor type persona.
Yeah.
Then I had my dad, who I was envious of, who I wanted to be like. I wanted to be successful like my dad, strong like my dad, and so I followed his footsteps as well, unfortunately, in the wrong direction. So
yeah. Okay. All right. So what about siblings? Talk about that a little bit.
So
and
you know, say that again.
Talk about siblings and then the whole dynamic of it.
Okay, so my dad obviously had a two previous marriages before he met my mom. So I have a sister who I've never met. She wants nothing to do with our side of the family. She wants nothing to do with the siblings. We've reached out. And then I have an older twin brother and sister who my brother's a pastor at church. They own a cleaning company. He's very successful. And my older sister, Tracy, she owns her own cleaning business. She's successful as well. And they were my dad's kids. Not that they weren't accepted by my mom, and that's not what I want to portray, but those were my dad's kids. And so when he met my mom and he wanted to have kids, they had me, and I'm not going to say he was against, and I'm not going to say he was ever like shitty with me, or he was a good dad. But it was made very clear that he did not want kids after Todd and Tracy. And it was kind of I guess you could say, what do you call that? Like coming to terms. Like it was an agreement. Like my mom wanted kids, so he decided to give her kids. So they had me. My mom was actually working at ODOT at the time. she quit when they had me, and then my sister ended up coming along 3 years later. I have a younger sister, Deanna. Um, I got to be honest. Me and my siblings, we get along. We don't get along great. There's just been stuff over the years. Do I love my brothers and my sisters? Absolutely. I still talk to my younger sister, probably almost every day. I love all of them. There's been a lot of disagreements. There's been a lot of just things happen over the
Yeah.
years. But we were all very close growing up too. I remember Sundays. It was always Sundays. The whole family came over. It was big dinners, hanging out by the pool, riding four-wheelers. Just good quality. Like we had I'll call it the Brady Bunch because we were a big mixed family. We had the Brady Bunch.
Yeah.
It was wholesome like that. Brian, you used to be out there on the weekends too. It was just a lot of fun, and that's what it was like growing up for us, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So, later on, you graduate through high school. You mentioned that you played football, so you're athletic and things of that sort. Like going into the future a little bit, like what happened after high school at that point? Like, so was there ever like something significant? Like, what was it that kind of got you down the path that led you to eventually going, down against the grain, basically, like the rebel side, like with your dad?
So there was I mean, I was always a troublemaker, and not a troublemaker like in literal terms, but like I said before, I always bucked against authority. But coming out of high school, I never really messed with drugs outside of smoking weed in high school. I mean, I might have done acid or mushrooms here and there, but I was always staunchly against hard shit that I knew was going to fuck my life up.
Yeah.
But I remember sitting on my buddy's patio one summer afternoon, and I was killing myself landscaping that summer. I was sunburnt from head to toe. Went to his house after work to pick up a bag of weed, and we were sitting out on his patio smoking, and he pulls out a wad of cash. And we're sitting there talking, and he starts talking to me, and he was like, you ain't got to kill yourself doing all that. He's like, I sit at home all day, and I make all this in a week. And at 18, 19 years old, I'm like, fuck, why am I killing myself all week? So found a couple connections and started selling weed here and there. And that was probably that was the moment where I was like, and then it was just easy money. And then you're in the lifestyle, and then you know what I mean?
So
you're getting
you
caught
just
up.
kind of got. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. So basically,
No,
what you're saying is just like, you got sucked in. You saw that amount of cash. You saw that opportunity.
And I always like, and again, going back to my dad, I always wanted fuck you money. Like that's, I know there's a reason the Lord hasn't given me fuck you money to this point, because I'm not the dude that needs it. I've earned the nickname Petty Crocker. Like that's not the nick. That's not what I need in my life. But it was that. And so and it doesn't. You don't have to be good at anything to be a drug dealer. Anybody can be a drug dealer, but it's not. It's a level of stress and anxiety. You're constantly looking over your shoulders, so on and so forth. But it's not anything I ever recommend to anybody. It's a shitty life to live. It's a paranoid life to live. But to get back on track, I had injured myself playing football too. And at this point I was already selling, I had started selling weed, and this was obviously before I hurt my back in
high school.
No, I started selling weed after high school, but what I'm getting at is I had jacked my back up. I had a D1 opportunity to go play at Akron, screwed it up. I was hurt. And I was in pain management at that time, and they put me on, this was now mind you, this was back around the opioid epidemic. They started putting me on Percocets. Within a year, by the time I was about 20 years old, I was getting about 224 Percocets a month. So you add that into the mix of everything, and now I'm a drug addict as well as, you know what I mean? And then that was another big turning point for me, because once my pills ran out, then with opiates, I would fiend for opiates. Like and those 224 pills would last me maybe 2 weeks. maybe
Mhm.
3. And then that last week, I'm sick, I'm detoxing, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get money. And, I worked a full-time job through all this too. And, I mean, I could get into the first of many charges to kind of piggyback off that. But, yeah, I always held a full-time job, and I started stumbling, man. It was falling down a flight of stairs in slow
Going,
motion.
going down the rabbit hole.
Yep, going down the rabbit hole.
So yeah, so obviously, I mean, you don't need to go into detail or whatever, but like just kind of explain to everyone that doesn't know, like what happened, like the night that changed, and you ended up going to prison, or the day, whatever. Like just kind of like a
Well,
little.
so yeah,
Kind
I
of
mean, I'll piggyback back just a little bit to like the first time I ever got in trouble, because it's kind of significant. It just reiterated that whole bucking against authority and fuck you, I'm going to do what I want mentality. So like I said, I always worked a full-time job, and I was working at L'Oreal, like the hair and makeup place, their distribution center. I was a dock worker. It was a really good job at the time. I was making like 20 some bucks an hour. And going back to the drug problem with the Percocets, I had met this chick that worked at a orthopedic doctor's office. And, her and I, we weren't like talking, but like through conversation, she basically told me for a fee, she would give me control numbers, DEA numbers, like all the shit that you need to write a script, and that she would help me pass it and so on and so forth. So my very first charge was falsification of drug documents, which is an F5 felony. So basically what had happened is drug task force was watching me because I was putting tons of these through the system. There's a clearinghouse got flagged. I wasn't doing them in my name, but the way the clearinghouse got flagged is I was using the same doctor's name. So drug task force started watching, and basically Des got arrested. Desiree is my ex-wife. She got arrested for passing one of the scripts over in Hudson. Hudson police show up, and then we're getting visits from drug task force. And then eventually they indicted me through a grand jury. And I was at work one day, and and the reason that this is significant to me is because this affected my child right off the rip. Not in like a literal sense, but so I had bought tickets to go to Disney on Ice, and it was a Friday. And anybody that knows anything about the criminal justice system knows they serve warrants on Friday because they want to set your ass in jail for the weekend. So it's Friday. I'm down on the dock. I get a call on my radio. They're like, Chris, come up to HR. So I'm like, okay. I walk up to HR, walk into a room. It's drug task force, Streetsboro Sheriff, or Streetsboro Police, Portage County Sheriff, HR, and the head of security from the building, all in this little conference room.
Mm-hmm.
So the drug task force looks at me and they're like, Christopher Tackett, yeah. And they're like, you're under arrest. You've been indicted by a grand jury. Here's your paperwork, blah, blah, blah. Turn around, put your hands behind your back. So, all right. So they arrest me, take me to jail. And, getting older, I've always told my kids, you get fucking locked up, you're sitting your ass in jail. And this is why. So they take me in to process me. It's about 11, 12 o'clock in the day at that point. And I got my phone call, so I called my dad. And he's like, sit tight. He's like, I'll figure it out. So my dad, with all of his fuck you money, had donated a ton of money to Dwayne Cayley's, who was the sheriff at that time, his reelection.
Mm-hmm.
He owned the bars, so he was in with the judges. So I remember I'm asking the corrections officer behind the desk, and I'm like, when am I getting out of here? I said, I've got plans to take my kid to a show tonight. I was being polite. That was my mom coming through. Like I was always respectful, always polite. And he starts laughing at me. He's like, you're fucking funny. You're cute. He's like, you ain't going fucking nowhere. He's like, take your ass. He was like, lay it down. He's like, you're going to be here till Monday. And at that point, I'm upset. I'm like, dude, like I had these tickets to take Chris to go do this. Like Christopher's my son, for those of you that don't know. And, about 30 minutes later, I hear this dude yelling in the phone. This is bullshit. This is trash. You can't do. He hangs up the phone, and all of a sudden, he yells my name. They kept all the doors open in booking at that time and that afternoon for whatever reason. So he yells Tack, and he's like, "Get your shit, you're leaving." And I stood up and I was like, "I thought I was here for the weekend." He was like, I was kind of like grinning. He's like, "I don't know who the fuck your people know." He was like, "But he was like, you got bailed out." I didn't even have to go in front of a judge until maybe no, I take that back. They had me video arraigned right then. The judge said a $10,000, 10% bail. My dad posted it. And I just grinned at the CO walking out. Now that shit bit me in the ass down the road because he remembered me the next time I came through there. But but it was my dad's fuck you money, and it was me thinking I was somebody because of my dad bailing my ass out of jail, and my dad bailing me out again, and so that was the first point. But no, there's a lot of stuff that sent me completely over the edge. I had about probably 5 other county jail stints, and it's hard to explain, man. Like the first time you're in there, I was detoxing. It was for kiting checks. And I remember I got indicted to a grand jury on that. I don't think, no, I was definitely shooting dope at that point. So I had eventually progressed from doing pills to shooting dope. I lived in one of our rental properties downtown. Excuse me. And, I had this guy move in with me. Des had left. She had moved out with the kids because I was too far gone at that point. I was still on pills at that point. And then I had a buddy move in, and he asked me one night, he was like, why are you spending all this money on oxys? He was like, heroin's so much cheaper. And so I'm like, oh, I'm not doing heroin. I'm not doing all that. And he finally talked me into it. We went out to Newton Falls. Got a gram of dope and ended up shooting it, and it was off to the races after that. I had several more run-ins with the police through that point, and then after being hooked on dope and for as long as I was, I think I was on heroin for roughly like a year, maybe 2 years, and then I had a couple stints in rehab. But after you start, and it's with anything that anybody likes, after you start injecting, or once you cross your limit, you're done for. And needles were always my limit. And I was just like, I crossed it. And then at that point, it's off to the races. But so what had happened with me getting into trouble is I had actually started burglarizing houses. And I very clearly remember the first one that I did. I had lost my jobs. I couldn't hold a job for shit. My mom didn't cut me off, but it was very much so you're at arm's length. She would have me over periodically for holidays for like dinner, and then you're going back to where you came from. And so she had me over. I think it had been a couple of days since I had eaten or something. She calls me. She says, "Hey, come over. Let's eat lunch." So I'm like, okay. And for whatever reason, like the thought had crossed my mind. It just started. I don't know where I got the thought from, to be honest with you. Still to this day, I have no idea. It's just kind of like easy money. So I had the thought after I left her house to go into somebody's house, and I did. And I had forgotten something at her house because I remember I pulled back in the driveway. I had to go back to her house, and she walked back out because I had only been gone about a half hour at that point. She walks out to hand me whatever I had forgotten. And she's looking in the front seat, and she goes, "Where did you get that?" And I was like, "Where did I get what?" I was like, "That was in the truck." She was like, "No, it wasn't." She was like, I check your truck every time you come over here." No, it wasn't. So I blew her off. I'm like, whatever, I leave. I don't know if she knew. We never really talked about it, but that was the first time I ever went into somebody's house. And then at that point, I'll just fast forward without incriminating myself at all. I will say, so the day that I got arrested, I had wrecked my car, so I no longer had a vehicle. It was the middle of winter, So I got a ride down to a family friend who owns a car shop on the other side of town. He did like buy here, pay here type thing. So I walk in, I'm like, hey, so and so. I'm like, I've got it's all public record. His name's Dave. I'm like, hey, Dave. I got this job in the pipeline. I was like, I'm supposed to start working like tomorrow or the next day. I need a vehicle. Like, can you hook me up with something? And this guy was invited to mine at this wedding. Like, he was a good family friend. So, me being a con artist and a drug addict, and being able to smooth talk my way through shit, he gives me a Charger. It was a black Dodge Charger, all blacked out V8. And I then proceeded to leave, go burglarize 3 houses, and the very last house that I hit was he was an old man. He wasn't home, and so I booted his door in because I always kicked doors in if they were locked. Booted his door in, went in, and I had a bunch of stuff. I had a safe. I had like a computer and I think a couple jewelry boxes set up by the door, if I recall. And I had gone back up. Something had caught my eye upstairs. I turned around to run back upstairs to grab whatever I saw. There was a reason I ran back upstairs. And as I'm coming back down, he's standing in the doorway. And he's like, who are you and why are you in my house? And my stupid ass, I look at him and I'm like, well, I guess I'm just the guy that just got caught. And so he's like, all right. And I like put my hands up. I'm like, listen, I said, I'm not going to hurt you. I said, I'm not going to touch you. You can call the police. And I want to go back just a little bit because I want everybody to understand people don't just do that shit. I mean, there are people that do that shit, but drug addicts that do that shit, I remember being at such a low point in my life at that point. And I was making enough money by stealing shit and boosting shit that I would have so much dope by the end of the day that I would literally play the game of how much can I fit in a syringe? I was mixing cocaine with heroin. I literally wanted to die. I would fall asleep so high every night that I would just hope that I wouldn't wake up. So I remember this gentleman catching me in his house, and obviously as soon as the initial like surprise of seeing him comes through, I break down into tears. And the guy literally comes over and he's like, okay, he was like, because obviously I'm a big guy. I'm 6'6", 300 pounds. This was a little old man. You know what I mean? And so I'm like sobbing at this point. And I got to be honest, dude, I wasn't sobbing because I got caught. I was sobbing and I was so upset because I was so sick of who I was, sick of what I was doing. I hated myself on a day in and day out basis. I felt like the world's biggest disappointment and failure. That's why I was upset. I was honestly relieved at that point that I had gotten caught. I had U.S. Marshals looking for me from all the, there was a bunch of stuff going on in the area for going on like 3 months. Like to the point where the one U.S. Marshal Springer would call me in the middle of the night and be like, I'm outside your door, bitch. And I'd be like, what? And I'd like, your heart sinks immediately. And I'm looking out the window. And then he'd be like, I'm going to get you. And he'd hang up the phone.
Yeah.
But so I go outside and I'll never forget. He sat and he talked with me. And it felt like 5 years. It was probably less than 3 to 5 minutes that the cops came, threw me on the ground. But I remember sitting down. And that gentleman sat down next to me, like literally right next to me. I want to say he put his arm around me, but I can't. There was a lot of adrenaline at that point, but I vaguely remember him either like putting his arm around me or putting his hand on my lap or something. And he told me, he's like, you don't have to live like this. And I kept saying, I was like, I'm sorry. I said, it's nothing. I said, I'm sorry probably 100 times. And he was like, you don't have to be sorry. He made a comment of feeling sorry, or I forget exactly what he said, but it always resonated with me looking back on it because I was like, that was the most compassion anybody had shown me in a long fucking time, because I was a straight dirtbag, dude. I was a piece of shit. I didn't care if you were my mom. I didn't care if you were my brother, sister, best friend. Like if I could take something from you and go and sell it for drugs, that's what I was doing. Mm-hmm. And so I felt like just such a just a waste of oxygen at that point. And that was
Yeah.
the first time I'd ever felt some sort of compassion in a long time.
Yeah.
So then I obviously went to Brimfield. They had found stuff from the 2 other houses I had been at, and they arrested me for burglary. So
how long were you in?
So I did a total with my county and with my, so I got time served in county and then time served, or then I went to prison, and it was a total of 2 years.
2 years. Okay.
2 years. When I got caught, when I got caught, I was suspected of over 80 burglaries.
Wow.
I was all over the news. I was all over the front page of the papers up here. I know you guys live down south. I remember my first day in county jail, I walked out. CO, I think her name was Suggs. It was she was a big black woman. She came and woke me up and threw the newspaper at me. I was like front page news. And so I threw it back at her and told her to get out or whatever, said something, and then I got up, and as I was walking out of my jail cell, they had big TVs. And as soon as I walked out, my face was all over Channel 3 News, like local blah 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 man gets, and I'm like, man, like, but yeah, so yeah, that's what got me locked up.
So I'm sure that in that 2 years that you were in prison, I'm sure that you probably have a crap ton of stories to talk about. Yeah. Maybe that's something that we get into in another episode. I don't know if you want to touch base on it now or make that another, a whole nother episode.
We can do it whenever. I'm sure the stories will come up.
I'm thinking at this point, I'm kind of like, so basically, like you've laid the foundation of what led you to that point. So what was it? Was it something in jail? Was it that moment that you just described? Like, what was that aha moment where you're just like, fuck, I have got to get my shit together?
The aha moment was the first visitation that I had. So in county and in prison, visitation's a little different. In county, you have a phone on the wall, you have glass. You can't touch, it's nothing. In prison, you go in, you can sit with your family, you can play like board games, you can go get stuff to eat out of the vending machines, they'll let you hug each other. If you have kids, they'll let your kids sit on your lap. And dude, I fucking remember the aha moment was the first time that I got to see Chris and Nevaeh. And I remember the fucking we sat and we played, and dude, they were so fucking, they were so fucking happy to see me. And I hadn't seen them in months because my mom didn't want to have those types of visits like through the glass. And so we sat, we played board games, and then it came time to leave. And dude, if those 2 fucking kids didn't put the jaws of life around my neck and start screaming, and start crying and bawling, they kind of got dealt a raw deal when I got locked up. I'm not, and I plan on having Des on here, and she's kind of owned up to everything that had happened. Like she dumped the kids on my wife's or on my sister's doorstep. So the kids kind of got a raw deal through, but when I went to jail, Des couldn't handle it, and she kind of just offloaded the kids. It was too much for her to handle by herself. But dude, those kids putting the jaws of life around me, and me knowing that they didn't have a parent, because even through all my addiction and so on and so forth, I was always going to see them. They were always with me at the cottage that I was living in. They were always, you know what I mean? I always still had them. Was I fit to be around my kids? Fuck no. But those were my kids, dude. And like, they were never in harm's way. They were never like taken to dope houses. But yeah, man, the aha moment was I just literally, I was in line sobbing, and there was actually another big jacked black dude behind me, and we had to wait in line after visitation you have to strip out naked.
Yeah.
And they check you, and then you go back on to the yard. Then you go back to your housing unit. And this guy behind me, man, he patted me on the back. He's like, bro, he was like, that's the hardest shit to watch every visitation. And he was like tearing up too. He's like, I'm sorry you had to deal with that. And I just always said from that point forward, it's funny you asked me about the aha moment, because my mom, I just watched a documentary about prisons for profit last night, and it featured Lake Erie, which is so Lake Erie, when I was there, it was the first state prison to be converted to private. And the ACLU did a video on how fucked up the prison was while I was there, with the amount of drugs and violence and extortion and everything that goes on in a typical prison. There's literally anybody that wants to watch the video. The link's going to be on the webpage in the link session, but it's YouTube Profit for Prison. But that was the time I was there. My mom asked me, she goes, so what kept you clean while you were in there? She was like, if all these drugs, like they literally talked about, and I remembered seeing them, they would slit tennis balls and throw tennis balls full of heroin or dope or whatever over the walls. We could talk about all that later, and duffel bags were coming up over the walls. And she asked, she said, how did you stay sober through prison? And I'm like, I told her, I said, that first visitation fucking wrecked me. And they say everybody has a rock bottom. And, a lot of people would probably look at my story and be like, waking up in a prison cell and having to detox through prison and everything else, or county jail would be your rock bottom. Yeah, it was pretty fucking low, but my absolute rock bottom was being fucking sober for, at that point, it was about 6 months.
Mhm.
And having and going through that with my kids. I'm feeling hopeless about being able to help them, feeling hopeless that, if something were to happen to them, I'm not out there to take care of them, or to, you know what I mean? Feeling that was the absolute hopelessness, because I had mastered with drugs for so long before that. It never really bugged me. Like, yeah, I was upset. Yeah, I was sad, but hey, let's go do some more drugs and we'll fucking forget about it. At this point, I'm sober and I'm seeing the damage of what I caused. And I'm like, oh, fuck. You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
but yeah, I told go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing with you. I mean, when you're in that moment where all you have to do is get inside of your head pretty much, and then you wake up, you're clean, you're sober, and you look around and you look at the damage, and you're just like that conscious awareness at that point that changes everything. So going on beyond that, because obviously, you're here now. How many years has it been since you've been out?
So it'll be 10 years this year.
A decade. Okay. Well, congratulations. And part of the whole reason of this podcast is because, the heart of this is that no matter what you have gone through in your life, you can grow, you can become better.
Yeah.
And you are a prime example of that. And I know that right now there are probably hundreds, if not thousands, of other men and women out there that have been in the prison system, that have lived that life similar to you, and getting out has a whole new set of challenges. Like you said, you had a F5 felony, and so coming out of that, what the hell did you have to do? Explain your mental state, how you had to focus, what the drive that you had to have to overcome all the obstacles to go from being in prison, having absolutely nothing, hitting rock bottom, to doing what you have done now. I mean, you've gotten your life completely transformed. Obviously we're always on growth, and striving to be better. I don't feel like anyone ever really truly arrives,
Right.
But getting to that point where you're just like, man, just like I'm doing this come hell or high water. I'm getting my body in shape, which you obviously have done. You've been hitting the gym, you transform your body, you transform your mind. You've gotten a job, you've been stable, you've got a home now. I mean, talk about all that stuff. Like, what was it that?
Man. So, it's kind of that do or die mentality, and I trying to think how to start this off. It was legitimately, I came home with the mindset of, you just have to be a fucking monster, and that's why, I mean, I've hashtag we build monsters for years, and I've written Facebook posts about that hashtag, because that's kind of the stuff. I'll throw it in a search engine and go back and, or like the search bar and go back and look at all my posts because it details my growth throughout the years. But
Mhm.
it was always, I have to go home and be a fucking monster, not in the literal sense of a violent, like ugly, but like you have to be a monster in fucking life. You have to come out, swinging. You have to come out with the determination and the mindset that fuck society, fuck what society thinks. You're already a second class citizen at this point. They don't owe you shit, and you're going to have to work 10 times harder for everything that you fucking want in life. And you have to adapt that mindset before you even hit the streets, because the second you get out and you start getting told no at jobs,
Mhm.
you start getting told no on leases and rent and trying to rent. You start getting told no over and over and over again. And if you don't have that mindset of I'm overcoming adversity and I'm fucking knocking life's dick in the dirt
Yeah.
from the start, it's just going to snowball and you're going to build up this resentment. You're going to build up all this. Because I have to be honest with you, 10 years down the road, 10 years later, I still get hit with bullshit all the time because I'm a convicted felon.
Mhm.
And it's to the point now, I flat out tell people, like, you know what I mean? A lot of it will be conversations and it's the automatic judgment. And you know what, at this point in my life, I don't really fucking care. Like, I've built a great life. For those of you that don't know, I just to give a quick recap on what I've done for the last 10 years, I came home and I immediately got a job working at Olive Garden. And guys, there's nothing wrong with coming home and getting a job serving to suffice your probation, to make some money to put in your pocket. I made good money when I served. I'm 6'6". I'm ugly. I have tattoos everywhere, and I still made good money. There's nothing wrong with serving. I know a lot of felons that still do it. But I came home, I got a job, and then I started building on that job, looking for other jobs while still having that job. And then, I got my car. I finally got a car back. So after the car, I met Mary and I got a good woman in my life, and I'm not saying you guys need a good woman in your life. It helps, but also a bad woman in your life, it'll fucking knock you right back in the opposite direction as well. Luckily I found a really great one. But she's motivated, she pushes me, so on and so forth as well. But I kept pushing myself to find the next best thing as far as employment went, as far as things that I could be doing, So I left the Olive Garden and I went and worked for a lumping company working in cold storage, throwing boxes, called Capstone Logistics. Worked third shift for it was about a year and a half, 2 years. I ended up being promoted to supervisor because I also want to tell everybody out there, another big part of succeeding is going above and beyond.
Mhm. Good.
I was never the guy, hey, can I leave early? I was never the guy, no, I can't do that. I was never the no, that's not my job kind of guy. You know what I mean? I was always the, oh, we need that rail cart unloading and it's fucking 30 below back there on the dock. All right, cool. Gas up the bus. Let's go. I was always that guy, and I'm still that guy to this day. That's one of those things, it's, you have to embrace the suck. You have to embrace the suck. And you have to treat everything as it's a lesson. There's a lesson in everything, no matter if it's you're getting your teeth kicked out or you're at a wedding with and having a great time. You know what I mean? There's always a lesson in there. And you just have to keep pushing. And so, my wife started married. We weren't married at this point. We had moved in, jumped over some obstacles trying to get housing because I'm a felon. Decided to buy a house. Ended up buying a house. Right as we were buying this house, I found a job doing equipment sales, and within a couple years, being the, hey, I'll take the shittiest job you got, and having the mindset of I'm not going to fail. I'm going to do the best that I can all day, every day. I ended up being promoted to a production manager with that company, and I stayed there for almost the entire. So my first few jobs were like real short stints when I got home, but I was at that company I think 8 years, and I think 6 of it, 5 or 6, I was production and then an operations and safety manager. So I ran a company of 150 indirect reports, had 2 facilities, that I oversaw. I was trusted with this. You know what I mean? And I want to touch on that real quick too, because you people aren't going to trust you because of what you did. It doesn't matter if you got into a bar fight, you have a felony.
Mm-hmm.
Society says you can't be trusted. So you have to build relationships with people. You have to learn how to talk to people. You have to learn how to read people and how to interact with people professionally and correctly. And you have to carry yourself as a professional at all times. Now, there's times that I get out there and I play the fuck out of crazy and act like an idiot. Sometimes you revert back to your old ways. It is what it is. But you have to continuously build yourself. You have to continuously, like nowadays, everybody wants their own brand. You have to remember the way you're carrying yourself in public and the way that you're working and the way you're progressing and the way that you are living your life. That's your brand. Like, you are your brand. And so when you go on these interviews, you know, it's too easy for somebody to hop on Facebook and be like, hey, well, you said this day, this, that day, so on and so forth. You know what I mean? But you have to continue to build yourself and do it in a positive manner because society's already got it out for you. You're a second-class citizen the second you commit that. The second you are sentenced on that felony and found guilty, you are a second-class citizen. I hate to say it. It's disgusting that somebody can't serve their time and then be released of that background, and it has to be put into play on everything that you do. But it's the way that it is. And you know what? Anymore, I fucking like adversity. So you give me a problem, I'm going to solve it. You give me a hurdle to jump over. I may not like it. I might bitch about it. I might fucking cry about it, but I'm going to jump over it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's where, and again, falling back on like, just, you got to be a monster, man. You can't be afraid. You just kind of have to put your head down and run through it like a bull. And you can't have the mentality of, I will say you have to have ways to pivot too. I mean, pivoting's never a bad skill set to not have. You have to always have something cooking on the back burner that, hey, if this doesn't work out, I'm going this way. And if that doesn't work out, I'm gonna pivot this way. But no, man, it's really
based on that because I think so many people go through life and they don't have a plan. And I think when you don't have a plan and you don't like cast your vision for what you actually want for your life, it's too easy to get tossed in the woes in the trials of life. You know what I mean? You get lost at sea that way. Unless you have set your course and your eyes on something, you know, and strategize, like I'm going from point A to point Z and here's exactly what I'm doing. And I think that's so important. I want to just, you know, to kind of throw that in there because you kind of did that. You know, you may not have had all of, you know, the plans and the strategies in place, but you at least had the mindset that, hey, look, no matter what, I'm moving forward. I'm planning for stuff. Even if it doesn't work out, I've got a side gig ready to go. You know, that no matter what, I'm still moving forward. I'm constantly growing. I'm not giving up. I will not go back to where I was, you know, that mentality. So that's all.
And that's what you don't have to, dude. You don't have to have a plan B or a plan C. All you really have to have is just the mindset of, I'm fucking getting through it. Like it's going to happen one way or another.
Yeah.
And you know, and it's funny you said that because one of the big realizations I had was when I worked at Poly and I was the production manager and I had all these reports underneath me and every day it was this woe is me. It was woe is me. Like this is my life and I have this going on. And listen, I'm not taking away from anybody's struggles. I get it. You know what I mean? But I'm also going to tell you, I used to encourage all those people up there. And by the time I left, I was probably one of the favorite managers that had ever been through there. But I was one of the most hated managers by upper management because I always encouraged people to do better there. They'd come in crying and they'd come in upset and I'd be like, motherfucker, like I was facing 8 years in prison, did 2, came out. Like, you know what I mean? You're letting adversity kick your teeth in. Like, I can't help with that. I can tell you, suck it up, buttercup, go do it. But I said, you got to get in front of it and have the mindset that you're going to do better. And dude, I used to flat out tell people, I'd be like, yeah, your life does suck. You're at a fucking company making $10 an hour. You know how you change it? Fucking do better. Go back to school. Go look for another fucking job. Like,
yeah, right.
But yeah, I get it, man. People get so stuck in that mindset of, oh, life sucks, and dude, that'll eat people. It'll
Yeah.
fucking eat people alive.
Right. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, man, that's good stuff. Good stuff. So let's see what else, man. I guess I have one last question. And then from there. So for somebody that's listening today, I know we've kind of touched base on it. Like, what advice could you give someone that maybe just got out of prison, or and they just don't know what to do? Like, what's the first step? Like, if you could give someone the keys to set them on a successful path, what advice would you give them?
The first advice that I would give somebody is sit down and develop a plan. Figure out, you need to maybe think, you need to look at what your strengths are, look at what your weaknesses are. Maybe look at some programs you can get into. I will tell you, and again, we're going to launch the website with the podcast, and I've got a ton of links I'm putting up there. Jobs that'll hire felons, careers that felons can get into. There's grants that felons can apply for. All that's going to be available on the website. So you can go on there, click around, but do some research. Formulate a plan. Formulate a plan based on what's going to make you happy, because that's what'll keep you. If you were a drug addict, that's what's going to keep you sober. That's if you're a repeat offender, that's what's going to put you on the course to have some sort of skill set that you don't have to continue committing crimes and end up getting locked up. You have to formulate a plan. Look at what your interests are. Look at what your likes are. Find something that you enjoy doing. For me, like I enjoyed management, but I drive a semi now. I said, screw the management gig. It was too much stress. It was literally eating me alive dealing with the management above me and the owners. They were just difficult people to work for, but I always found my peace, and I always found I was able to get my aggressions out and work through problems, do some deep thinking when I was in the gym. Like that's one of the big things that I have never given up since coming home. You know what I mean? I've been a straight gym rat junkie since I came home. That may not be for you. Get into woodworking. I started a woodworking business on the side. You remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Find something that you enjoy doing and make it part of your income. That would be the first step. Second step would be stay the fuck away from all your old people.
Yes.
I remember, quick story. I remember when the weekend I came home, my mom and sister it was a party. It was a street party for me down on Lincoln. Little did they realize all my boys hung out in the dope house 2 houses up. So they had been calling me for a week. Hey, you're home. Let's link up. Hey, you're home. Let's do this. Let's do that. And I'm like, nope. Like, we're not. You know what I mean? They were coming down, knocking on the door. I wasn't coming out. And so they throw me this party, and 3 of my buddies came over, and it was so awkward because I knew at that point I didn't want anything to do with them.
Yeah.
I can love you from afar. I respect I don't respect what you're doing, but I understand what you're doing. You know what I mean? And I flat out told him, I said, look, man, like I said, it fucked me up not having my kids while I was gone and seeing all this shit. Like I'm doing me now. You know what I mean? It's no offense to you. I love you. I'll give you a hug when I see you in public, but that's just what it is right now. You have to cut ties with all your old, especially if you were using dope or drugs or anything like that. I relocated. I moved 45 minutes south of where I lived at when we bought our house, because the apartment we lived in was still 2 houses down from my boy's house. You know what I mean? So we relocated, and I think when you come home, you need to find a good support group. And even if that's AA or NA, which I'm not fully on board with, and I don't knock it, but I'm a big firm believer of whole self change. We can get into it another time. It's part of AA, but I kind of just did it on my own terms. But I was in AA and NA when I came home, and I met a really good group of guys that I still stay in contact with. And funny story is, none of us go to meetings anymore. We've all stayed buddies. We all still talk. Like they don't really like NA and AA. I don't really like AA and NA. And again, I'm not going to knock it. We all have our own reasons, but I found really good guys in there who were sober and who stayed sober.
Okay. Yeah.
I also, as buddies of mine came home from prison, they would contact me and reach out. And there's a couple of those guys that I'm going to have on the show that started their own businesses, started going to work full time and not doing stupid shit. And after 6 months to a year, you can kind of gauge if somebody's still on their bullshit, if somebody's not. I linked up with them, and they're some of my best friends still because they've got a different mindset now. They came home and did the same thing. It was fuck that, I'm not going back. Like they hit their rock bottom and they were done with it. Reconnect with your family if it's possible. Like that's been a big one for me too. Is I'm out here on the road Monday through Friday. I call my mom every day and I talk to my mom for an hour and a half every day. This woman, she never hated me, but she had given up on me. She 100% waited for that phone call and told me she would wait for that phone call that, hey, we've got your son down here. You need to come identify him.
Yeah.
So to have the opportunity to talk to my mom, and know that, I kind of tarnished that relationship and I've been able to rebuild that, rebuilding relationships, meaningful, valuable relationships. Always work on yourself, whether it's mentally, physically, emotionally, like figure out like what kind of a person you are. You have to do some like deep thinking, inward thinking. Who the fuck am I? Why was I doing this shit? It's not easy work, man. This is twice now that I've teared up on this thing, and it's because it's a lot of raw emotions that you kind of tucked away for years.
Oh yeah.
And now you have to deal with them without drugs and alcohol, and it gets rough, dude. And there's nothing wrong with fucking crying. You can call me a bitch if you want. I'm 6'6", 300 pounds. I don't give a fuck. I'll be a big crying bitch. But you just have to deal with those emotions, because if you don't deal with those emotions, you're going to be so. I mean, there's also going to be links to solid therapists and therapy sites that you can kind of link up with, and different websites you can go to find people in your area for help. And stay busy. That's probably the main thing is just stay busy.
Okay.
Because if you're not busy, what's that saying? Idle hands are of the devil.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So yeah, just stay busy.
Okay. All right. Well, that's awesome, man. Interesting. I'm sure that sometime in the future, we'll probably go. I'd like to go more in depth on some things. Talk about like past traumas and things of that sort. Because I know we were talking about earlier about stuff that I have going. That's where I feel like a lot of my work is with trying to help people is like soul searching. Dealing with the past traumas, dealing with generational curses, things of that sort. And just really kind of getting yourself to that point where you can become consciously aware of who you are and all of. Oh no, it died.
No, you're still there.
Am I still here? Oh, my phone's about to die. I thought I was gone, man. It just blacked out on me. I got scared. But anyways, just kind of dealing with those generational curses and those past traumas and finding healing in that. Because the truth of the matter is that your life is exactly what your brain tells you it is. And if your heart that is connected to you, that is basically controlling the words that come out of your mouth and controlling the thoughts that you think, man, that is so freaking important. And a lot of people do not realize that the reason their lives are in the shambles that they're in is because they've got some unhealed things inside of here that need to be dealt with, man, and up here. And they got to change the way they think. And part of that, like you were touching base on, man, which is so freaking important, is I can't remember who it is that said the quote initially, but that you are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. Yeah. And you hit on that, man. The people that drug you down, man, were the people that you were spending that most of your time with. Yeah. And look where it took you to. So if that's true, then the opposite in that has to be true also, man. If you're surrounding yourself with successful people, and you're surrounding yourself with people who are constantly pushing themselves, constantly trying to become better, constantly, always looking forward, staying positive and never quitting and never giving up, man. Those are the people that you got to link up with. You can't, if you're constantly linking up with the people that you were talking about before, it's going to drag you down and it's not going to be good. So nobody wants that in their life. I mean, really, nobody really does. At some point, it's going to bite you in the ass, man. Just like it did you, and just like it's done for so many people in the past, man. And you know, I don't know, but
no, there's three. You going back on what you were just talking about, real quick. There's three words that my wife has been punching me in the face with for the last like two to 3 weeks, and I have to be honest, I love it, and it's because it can be used in all different lights. Okay, it's, perception is reality. Okay,
mm-hmm.
the way you perceive yourself is your reality.
Yeah,
the way somebody perceives you is their reality. I think so many people would be, I think society, I think so many things would be so far better ahead if everybody understood that perception is reality. You know what I mean? If I'm taking the time to look at you and understand you and where you're coming from, and you're doing the same with me, then there's a different perception there, and then your reality obviously changes. But that was just my quick tidbit on that. But
yeah. All right. Well, that's all I got, man. So if you want to wrap things up, man, it's been awesome. I know my phone's or else I, you know.
No, you're good. We can wrap it. So just so everybody knows, just to give a little backstory, I wanted to do this a little bit earlier. It slipped my mind. So, like I said, we're gonna have, there's gonna be a web page put up. You can get the links on the web page. I'm gonna post to YouTube. We'll be on Spotify, Apple Music, or Apple Podcasts. Check us out across the board. And then we'll have Brian back on here maybe in another episode. If you guys want to get on the show, if you have stories you want to hop on and talk about what it was like in prison and what you did to change your life, if you have a success story, if you don't have a success story, if you just want to get on and shoot the shit, there will be a comment section. Just drop me a quick email. I'll get in contact with you. We'll get you on the show. I've got about 5 to 10 people lined up. Great guys ranging from my bunkie in county jail to my homie in prison. I've got a CO that's a good friend of mine that I'm going to try and get on. My ex-wife, I've got a whole plethora of people that are going to give you the inside scoop on what the inside life was like and what it's been like since they've come home. And I appreciate all you guys listening, tuning in to the B&L Volvo studio out here in Richmond, Indiana. I don't know where I'll be next week, but hey, we'll figure it out. Brian, I love you, buddy. Before we get hung up on or before we end this, I just want to say I love you, dude.
I love you, bro.
Again, with building relationships, I have been able to rebuild and rekindle so many relationships. And I think yours and mine at this point is one that I value above. You're probably like right under my mom and Mary. I'm not even going to like sugarcoat it. But I fucking love you, man. Like I love how I can be out here on the road and hit you up at a minute's notice, and it's an hour-long conversation, and I'm building you up, you're building me up. We're pushing each other. This is the type of relationship. Yeah. I love our fucking relationship. I love you. When I thought about who I wanted to quiz me on these, like, or to do the first episode with, I was like, well, duh, it's fucking Brian. But I've always looked up to you. You were always a role model to me because you're 4 years older than me. But I just want you to know I love you, dude. Like, and I super appreciate you doing this. I have the utmost respect for you, man.
Ditto, man. I love you too, man.
So
all right.
Well, we are out, and we will see y'all next time.